Here's another game I played a year or two ago. In this position, black is up a pawn, but white is about to recapture the pawn on e4, and white also has a fairly dangerous pawn on c6, so that may be a factor in the game. And during the game I was trying to calculate whether my shots on f2 would do any good, because it seems like black has a strong pressure against f2. The rook and the bishop are both looking at f2, and maybe the queen can even join that attack. But is there a way to make it work? So during the game I couldn't find any way to make it work, so I just played queen d6 and then I offered a draw a couple of moves later, and the opponent accepted the draw offer. And later, when I was looking at the game with the computer engine, I realized that there's a nice tactical possibility. So starts with bishop f2, and now if the rook takes on f2, then there's a fork. And it seems like black is getting what he wanted. He's getting the material back. But then white has an unpleasant move, rook e2, and now it turns out that if I take on d2, and he takes on e7 with check, and then he's still on time to pick up the d pawn, or at least to prevent it from queening, and then he still has his own very strong pawn on c6. I'm just not getting anything here at all. So the problem is that in this position the pawn is pinned on the e file, and that the queen falls with check, really. And it turns out there's a way to unpin the queen with the gain of tempo. So here black has a very nice tactical shot. He can play rook to f1, and the idea is really that if white takes, then black has a check, queen f8, and if the king retreats, or if white blocks, then he can take on d2 and he got the queen back, and his own queen is safe now on f8, right? So the computer gets really excited about this kind of possibility, and it seems like a very nice tactical shot. So, but what really comes out of this position? So white is down on material, but he has a very dangerous pawn on c6, and it turns out that if you analyze this position a bit more and more, it turns out that white's actually much better here. For example, h5, rook d7 goes. The pawn gets to c7, and it's really hard to deal with this pawn for black. And it turns out that his own pawns aren't really quick enough here. So, for example, if this happens, then if black tries to push c4, then white has ways of stopping it. Let's say if the pawn keeps going, then he can play something like h4, and if black takes, then rook f4 and rook c4, and now the rook is behind the pawn and is blocking. Well, the rook is kind of behind both pawns here, both the white pawn and the black pawn, and it's going to probably recapture this pawn. So this position isn't really to black's advantage at all. This is a bit of disappointing news, since we found such a nice tactical shot, rook to f1, that wins the queen for us, and seems like it's making the bishop f2 sacrifice work, but it actually leads to a worse position. And the computer gets really excited about it initially, because it doesn't realize how dangerous is the pawn on c7. And as you look into the position further and further, it understands better that the c pawn is very dangerous, and the queen is not enough to deal with this kind of pawn. So in a way, maybe it was a good thing that I missed this opportunity and didn't go for bishop f2 sacrifice, because otherwise I would have had to suffer in this kind of difficult position.